Thank goodness that I decided to invest in these lights back here, because we've been talking a lot of Xbox, so we've had a lot of green, but these lights, they change thanks to this remote here. Look, we can even do like red, and suddenly things are a lot more brooding in here. Maybe we're talking about Dragon Age all of a sudden, or we can go to blue, and suddenly things are a little more uplifting. See, it's all about the color, and today we talk about Xbox. Ladies and gentlemen, today was the Xbox Showcase Extended, where we got a behind-the-scenes look at a lot of exclusives coming to Xbox. We got updates on Game Pass games. There were some next-gen updates for games. It was kind of all over the place, but I really liked it, and it showcased, I think, more than anything, Xbox's preparation for E3 compared to others, where they had so much to talk about. They even had a part 2 to this conference. Now, there wasn't any gameplay or big reveals in the name of like studio acquisitions or gameplay trailers. But for example, we got a pretty significant update on Hellblade 2, a highly anticipated Xbox exclusive, and I was thrilled to see that. But before we begin, a big shout out to Paris, who did a phenomenal job hosting the whole showcase. So if you come across this video, man, well done. Congrats to you on the opportunity. And with that, let's go ahead and get into it, because it was a lot of information packed into all these little segments here. And it starts off with Playground Games. We're just going to go in order of how the showcase rolled. So Playground Games shows up, and they start going into some of the technical detail of how they built Forza. Now, you may be watching this going, well, Matt, you do a lot of Xbox stuff, you do a lot of RPG stuff, so I get why you're talking Forza, because it's a big Xbox thing. But here's kind of the more important thing to note is the tech details for Forza impact Fable, because they are both sharing the same engine. So that means that certain levels of detail that are being focused on in Forza, which didn't really make sense, kind of make more sense when you start to look at Fable. They talked about ray tracing, the level of detail and the draw distance, but they continuously emphasized objects up close. So while there wasn't a word on Fable, and by the way, Xbox marketed this one fantastically, it was exactly what I anticipated, which was just conversations and information. Them talking about up close and personal detail doesn't really make sense when you're playing a Forza game where you're flying by everything. You don't need meticulous detail on this tree over here. But if you're working on a fantasy RPG where you're going to be on foot, walking around, and seeing those much more up close and things are slowing down, it makes sense why those technical evolutions are impacting Forza Horizon 5. So just know there is a little something there, I think, transpiring. But overall, that's really what was happening with Forza, is just updates on its looks and feel, and how exactly they got this game looking so incredible. Like 400 hours of sky data captured that they then used to accurately create lighting in certain areas. It was pretty wild. But what was more important to me was Hellblade 2 from Ninja Theory. Now, this may sound like a leap, but hear me out when I talk about the attitude of the studio. Not the actual output, but the attitude of the studio right now sort of reminded me of how people talk about Naughty Dog. There is this very much perfectionist attitude coming from Ninja Theory now since they've been acquired. They talked about in this behind-the-scenes documentary look at Hellblade 2 how they created an individual slice for the game now, and they're fine crafting all of that, and then they'll build it out. That may sound not too encouraging and like the game's far away, and it kind of is. It's reportedly aiming for a 2023 release. But when it comes to Hellblade 2, I think what they're doing is building the systems, whether it be combats or things that can interact with puzzles or parkour or exploration. You build your systems, and then you build the game on top of those systems, those tools you use for development. And I think that was a way they were trying to say it in a general manner, but it didn't come across in a way where it's like, oh, they are not far along at all. The game is set in 9th century Iceland, but what I thought was really neat was that they mentioned how the lead actress and animators have underwent combat training, like actual legitimate combat training, to make things a lot more interesting. I like the combat in the original Hellblade. I thought it was solid enough, but it definitely demanded more depth. For a $20 title that sort of came out of nowhere and surprised everyone, it was fine. But now with the financial backing of Microsoft, suddenly you're like, let's take it up a notch. And one thing I noticed was in the motion capture, there was hand-to-hand combat being used. So I don't know if it's just going to be Senua using her blade this time. I think perhaps you might see a little bit of fisticuffs being thrown around, and that's awesome to see. Other than that, we just got a pretty trippy, atmospheric look at the development of the game, and I'm very curious of when we can finally see this game, which I'm assuming will be E3 2022. I think we're long overdue since this was the game revealed alongside the Xbox Series X. It makes me think of SMT5, Shin Megami Tensei 5, where they revealed this game alongside the Switch and then just it went away. it just went away. And now we're getting it this year, apparently, which I can't wait for this game, but it kind of gives me that feeling. So I really want Hellblade 2 to come around, and I think this is going to be one of the big bangers for Xbox when it starts showing itself. Another reveal was the Xbox Design Lab returning, so you can take tons of color combinations and write something out on your controller. It's eco-friendly, something I appreciated. They said they're like reusing different plastics to create these controllers, which I think is a very encouraging sign, certainly for the future. But when it comes to these controllers, this is something we get written in about a lot on Ham Radio and Defining Duke, are people who want to customize their Series X controller. They had this whole program go quiet for a while as they launched new consoles. Now it's back, and you can customize your own Series X, Series S controllers and put whatever color combinations and writing on it that you would like. I'm interested in when they start to do different forms of the Xbox controller. They did surveys on whether or not they should do DualSense capabilities, and if you can start to really customize like a Elite controller, something I've never owned personally. That's where I'd start to look into it, when it starts to touch on functionality and not just look, because I'm looking at the screen, not my controller. But some people are wired differently. They like the customized controllers. So for those of you out there who do care, boom, it's back. Psychonauts 2 also got a deep dive, understandably so. It's coming out very soon. I'm going to summarize this one as generally as possible, because maybe the game needed this because it's so weird and trippy and out there that it just needed to be very straightforward on what was happening. But it felt like Tim Schafer was sort of spoiling a lot of things about the game on a narrative level. And I don't know if Psychonauts is in particular a series you go to for a story, but he was really giving you your pound for pound. This happens. This is why it happens. Then this happens. And he sort of just laid out the first number of areas in the game and how everything unfolds. And while it did help in my understanding of the game, and I appreciate it a little bit more, because at first I went, oh, this game's just weird. But you start to see some thematic elements. He talks about you go into people's brains, and the names of enemies are interesting. Like you fight doubts, you fight regrets, and you'll see different amounts of enemies based off the personality of the character. So someone who's filled with doubt and regret, you'll fight more of those enemy types, and you have to take them on differently. So I found myself appreciating it more. But as you got more into the story, I went, I kind of don't want to listen, but of course I want to report to everyone what's going on with these games. So just know that generally speaking, there are more thematic elements behind the weirdness and the zany nature of Psychonauts 2. It's not just there to look like an acid trip. There is more than what meets the eye. And that's on me for just judging a book by its cover, because maybe more people knew than I, but when I saw and heard more, I went, okay, this is deeper than I expected. They promised side quests. You're able to turn people's minds back to normal by diving into their brains and sort of rewiring things. One example that I will give out is the hospital. You accidentally turn someone to a gambling addiction, and so the hospital turns into this hospital casino. And so the weirdness gradually became explained, but that's about as far as I genuinely would say you should go. Is that one example alone is fine, but when you know like everything else he said, I was like, man, I don't need to know all this, so I'm just gonna play different games and utilize my short-term memory and just hope I forget over time, because I do want to review this game. I do want to play it and talk about it on Defining Duke and here on the channel as well. But yeah, simply put, Psychonauts 2 looks solid, and it's a little more deep than I expected. So the Anacrusis was a game that I saw at Summer Games Fest, but I didn't realize this was also at least a timed Xbox exclusive. It's coming to Game Pass day one. This had a showing here at the Xbox Extended Showcase, and I thought that some of the systems they explained sounded kind of neat. So what they got into was they wanted to deliver something more uplifting. They felt after the pandemic, people are kind of in a more bleak position and want something more lifting. I hear more developers saying this. Hideo Kojima said the same thing, and I'm sitting here like writing my own story going, it's pretty fucked up, man. Like, so I'm just like, all right, y'all can write your uplifting stuff, I guess. Enjoy. They're saying the game will be different every time you play it, and that's thanks to what's called the AI driver, which changes where, for example, combat takes place or where weapons would spawn, etc. It dynamically adjusts based off your pacing. So if you're doing really well, maybe they won't give you certain weapons or health packs along the way because you're doing well. So it challenges you in different spots and sort of evolves as you play the game. One thing they also touched on were perks, which are shared regardless of level. So you could be a very high level, I could be a low level, we could share them. But more than anything is that they allow you to mix up the perks, and they define your role. So you don't play as the support class, the assault class, and so on and so forth. You get these perks and they define your role in turn, which I kind of liked. I wanted to see a little bit more, especially with the game apparently being so close. I definitely wanted to learn more. But system-wise, it seemed a little more grabby than I had given it credit for. So once again, this showcase is really justifying its existence as we continue on. There was Stalker 2. Only thing that I personally learned there was that this little artifact here recovers your stamina, and the thing that you were using, the detector, was called a Gilga. Outside of that, they didn't really touch on anything that I don't think the player couldn't have seen in general just by watching it. A Plague Tale Innocence got a next-gen update. This was really neat to see. It's coming July 6th. It's 4K 60 FPS. This is already available on Game Pass, and we know that the next game, A Plague Tale Requiem, is going to be day one Game Pass. So let me just put it out there again. If you have yet to play A Plague Tale Innocence, it's about 8 to 10 hours long, not bloated whatsoever. One of the most finely crafted and directed experiences you can have in gaming. Seriously, it respects your time. It does something pretty unique. You're in a vulnerable position as a young girl. You're not beating the snot out of people. You're kind of crawling around the level using all the tools around you, redirecting light, making use of the rats that are going to take out enemies for you instead. And so it is a very dark game, but it does a lot of things right, expertly well. So it's not doing a ton of things like so many games try to. It narrows its focus and nails 4 or 5 pillars very well, and I think that makes for a strong experience. Once again, it's on Game Pass, so if you haven't downloaded it, wait till this next-gen update pops, and then go ahead, give it a rip. Age of Empires 4 also showed up, and this probably had the largest amount of information of any game there. They talked about the House of Wisdom, which you can upgrade and use for your economy and your army, and they even brought up camel units, which will buff your armies. But what I thought was really cool is that they have documentaries made for this game that play between missions and bring the history to life. So for me, in class, my 2 best subjects were always history and writing. And I found myself falling out of love with history, unlike how I was when I was a student. And so when I heard this, my interest went up a level. Granted, I've been out of school for, oh dear God, I'm about to feel my age. Probably 4 or 5 years. Holy okay. Forget all of that. Point being, it's been some time. And so there's an excitement in me to play and learn. One of the things I always liked about Assassin's Creed was they did these kind of discovery modes, these tourist modes where you would just explore and learn about the history of the regions that the game were set in. And I thought that was really awesome because their goal was to use it as a learning tool for players. And I think this could sort of see the same thing with Age of Empire 4. The developers from World's Edge also stated that they looked at the stats for Age of Empire 2's naval combat, where they saw no one was really using it, but they chose to add it in 4 because people were saying that even though we don't use it, we want it there. Because when a sequel removes something, you feel like there was something of value lost, something that someone may have liked, they wanted there. So they admitted, hey, no one uses this, but we did it anyway. I think this is a real testament to having Microsoft at your back. Developers can make these choices and go, fuck it, let's do it anyway. And I like that. That's what this is all about. That's why some people do genuinely get excited when Microsoft tries to acquire people, because it leads to moments like this, or Wasteland 3 being fully voice acted. Those cuts that you see in games being made, they're making possible and not being cut. Not that they're heroes, not that they're perfect, but it's just a little more perspective from the inside. They talked about a new expansion for Age of Empire 2 Definitive Edition coming in August, and it's free to those who pre-order Age of Empire 4. You know the rule here, do not pre-order games, but still new information, just wanted to share with everyone. They announced 2 campaigns for Age of Empires 4, Rise of Moscow and the Mongol Empire, and there's a beta coming up. So a lot of Age of Empire 4 stuff. Carrick convinced me that I should give this a try. I was like, I've never played these before. And the way he described it, I thought, hey, this sounds really neat. More of an RTS style civilization game, and it seems more history driven. So I'm very, very intrigued by this game. I'm looking forward to playing it this fall. That comes to PC exclusively, and it's going to be on Game Pass. Sea of Thieves got a brand new gameplay trailer. It showed off new lands, new story content, new cosmetics. There were even cutscenes in this, because for those who don't know or aren't paying attention, while Sea of Thieves is known to be a PvP game, this seems to be more of a story-driven segment where Captain Jack Sparrow invades the seas. And while admittedly I can't stand him, there's something about him that pisses me off. I just got to be honest. I'm going to say it right out front. Something about Jack Sparrow bothers me. Just that, hey, what's up, man? But I'm going to play it because I always wanted to get into Sea of Thieves. Not on the level of crazy playing all the time, but it's fun when you play, but you had to go find the fun. I'm happy that they're adding content that's saying, hey, you know, you can just put a waypoint on your map and go get that fun. You don't got to wait for some player to ambush you, or you got to hunt the seas for another player, or go seek out treasure. Like, I just like that, yes, there's just something there that I can go and do, and I know it'll be sitting in a particular spot. They also announced that there will be a showcase on June 20th that is a deep dive. That'll be happening at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and I won't be there because that's my birthday, so I will be busy just chilling, doing hopefully absolutely nothing, but enjoying my life. Last but not least is Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is coming to Xbox Series X just next month, which is kind of wild to think about because, well, this is typically a PC-only game, and they've made some pretty significant changes to bring it to the console and make it more accessible at that. So first thing was that they added world map labels, so when you're flying around, you can not just identify it visually, but there are labels for particular areas. They added a discovery mode, so you can kind of guide yourself a little bit more, saying, okay, I want to go from LA to New York, and it'll sort of take you there, and you can kind of just see the sights. A lot of this is all about seeing. There are 22 total tutorials now, which may sound like a lot, but they're claiming it's much shorter than the 8 they originally had. So it may just be quick boom, boom, boom stuff. And last but not least, they added landing anywhere alongside flight assistance. So once again, it allows the game to be more accessible where you can sort of adjust on the fly and not have to be a complete expert at things. But I think more importantly than anything is landing anywhere. You know, I always tell people that if I were to play Microsoft Flight Simulator, I'm going to download it. I'm going to fly to my own home, go, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. Show my parents, and I'm going to delete the game. Like, that's my plan. And I mean that with no disrespect. Just that's the only thing I'm super curious about. It's like, all right, let's see what you got here, Microsoft Flight Sim. But other than that, that's all we got for this Xbox Showcase Extended. I hope you all enjoyed this video and walked away a little bit more informed. Was it worth the watch? I thought so if you were kind of deeply engaged on the Xbox side of things. But otherwise, I think these types of videos where you just round things up instead of watching the 2-hour showcase is much more helpful for the audience. So let me know what you're thinking, and I will talk to all of you very soon in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who are supporting the crazy content we're doing here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.